Welcome, friends, to historic Woodbury Elementary School. I'm Stephen Murphy, town moderator, and I'm pleased to introduce and moderate our event tonight, organized by Woodbury Community Library. This public forum with our state lawmakers titled Connect with Your Legislators. The connection we make here between constituents and representatives is secured by our strong and wondrous form of government, democracy, which, as expressed in the Declaration of Independence, derives its, quote, just powers from the consent of the governed. And powerful it is, here now among us, this free exchange of ideas, expression in speech, and exercise of the right to petition our government. The democracy stirring in this room is as true and complete, as forceful and grand, and as essential to the governance of our nation as the democracy practiced in any setting, from any podium, across any desk, anywhere in America. For democracy is not summoned here by fanfare and not apportioned in quantity or quality by the size of the assembly or the grandeur of the hall. Rather, like the divine spirit, democracy is present and whole where two or more gather in its name. Here in Woodbury, upon granite blocks and hemlock sills, creaking floors and folding chairs, we receive no less a share of democracy than those who gather under Greek pillars or golden domes. Here in our school gym, which serves also as our kitchen, our theater, sports arena, and meeting hall, democracy appears in full measure. All this is true because democracy comes not from without, but from within. From the minds and hearts of those who gather to govern themselves. A natural phenomenon whereby, through faith in elections and trust in law, we restrain our primal urges to protect our civil rights. We yield to the majority today that tomorrow the minority yields to us. It's push and pull, give and take, a move to the left, then a shift to the right. From mother to son, father to daughter, neighbor to neighbor, and age to age, doing our parts, united, resolved, and devoted, as Abraham Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address, that, quote, government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. So let us proceed in this work of self-governance, this practice of local grand democracy, by welcoming our representatives to government, our Vermont state legislators, our honored guests. Washington County Senators Ann Cummings and Andrew Perchlik, and Lamoille, Washington District Representative David Iacovone. Oh, pardon me. I'm sorry.
Okay. Hanging out.
We have 3 Washington State Senators. I apologize. We welcome also Senator Ann Watson. Yes. So with that, we invite our legislators to introduce themselves, and then we will open up the discussion to our assembly for comments and questions and exchange. So, Senator Cummings, yes.
You want the microphone?
Microphone.
Yeah.
I had 4 kids. I usually don't have trouble being heard. I'm Ann Cummings. I'm the senior senator in Washington County. I chair the Finance Committee in the afternoon, and this year in the morning, I'm on Health and Welfare, which is really good. We have 2 big issues this year. One is the cost of education, and the other one is the cost of health care. And the Finance Committee is responsible for health insurance and for the education fund, setting the property tax based on what the people in pure democracy vote to spend on their schools. It's going to be a busy year. The governor has put a major proposal out on the table. We're still trying to get enough information to even get our heads around it, but major changes. But then last year we saw a truly unsustainable increase in the cost of education. So we're doing a lot of balancing out there right now.
I'm Andrew Perchlick. I live in Marshfield. I'm the one state senator that's not here, that's not a former mayor of Montpelier. Luckily, they didn't make that a requirement. I'm in my 4th term, so I've been in the Senate for 6 years. All those 6 years have been on the the Committee of Transportation, and the first 4 years I was on education, so got a good education about education. But the 2 years ago moved to appropriations, and this year I'm the chair of appropriations. And we have crises throughout state government, education, healthcare we were talking about. Our transportation system also is not at the same level as crises as other ones, but we have some issues that we're facing there with the transportation funding as well. So dealing with that in the morning and the afternoon, the whole state budget. Pass it to you.
Hello, Ann Watson, state senator. Yes, indeed, a former mayor of Montpelier. I am in my 2nd term now as a senator, and was the vice chair and now the chair of Natural Resources and Energy, and also on appropriations. And I'm sure there's a lot of topics that we're going to talk about tonight. But one of the things that sort of pertains to some of the natural resources and energy is housing, and we made a lot of great progress last year with a bill that is still unfolding, but nonetheless there's, I think, more that can and should be done, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. Happy to share when it's time.
I'm Dave Iacovone. I'm entering my 6th term in the House of Representatives, though not in succession by any means. As I sit here, I can't help but think a couple of years ago, I was at one of your pie socials. I've come to several of those and always left with a pie. But there was a sign on the wall. It was over here. It was a great big sign. It said TEAM. T-E-A-M. Team for together. E for everyone, A achieves, M more. And I saw that and I said, that to me, as my friend Patrick said earlier, everyone believes that and knows that. But I used it on the floor of the House when we were debating an insurance bill because it was asking some of us to share a little so that others could get a lot. And it's in that spirit that I serve in the House on the Appropriations Committee. And I hope tonight, through questions and whatnot, I can get into some of the crises that I'm trying to address. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you all. Yes, Patrick Flo. Yes, yes. Folks, if you wouldn't mind using the microphone, we could get a better recording. Thank you very much.
I know you folks, I know most everybody in the room, I think. First of all, thank you all for being here. I have great respect for our citizen legislators. I worked with it a lot in my career, and I know you folks more or less, and I think you're great people, and I think we are incredibly well served having these folks as our representatives. Take my word for it. And they work incredibly hard. And we need to appreciate that. There are many issues I would love to talk about tonight. I hope we get to them. I hope we talk more about housing. I hope we talk more about healthcare. I hope we talk more about education. But I especially want to get a word in about climate change and what the state is doing. And I think it's great that Senator Watson is to chair that committee in the Senate now. Because I think the legislature has done a lot, and our governor, by the way, vetoed every single climate bill that came to his desk. So I'm not hopeful, especially what's going on in Washington. But I'd like to hear what you think the legislature can do to either sustain the progress we've made or even make more incremental change given what we're dealing with.
That's a great question. Thank you. So one of the things that came up in the governor's budget address, which I do support, is that he mentioned that he wanted to change the mission of Efficiency Vermont to be more climate oriented. And I think a lot of folks think that Efficiency Vermont has a goal to reduce carbon emissions. And they do, but it's a very small part of their goal. They're mostly charged with avoiding electric consumption. And so if you're going to put in a heat pump or an electric vehicle, that does not reduce electric consumption. And so they're limited in the amount of money they can put towards a program like that, which puts it at odds with the goal of carbon reduction. And so I think this has actually been a long time coming to shift the mission of Efficiency Vermont to have carbon reduction as a main focus of their work. I think that's, I'm so actually really pleased that the governor mentioned that, and looking forward to working on that. And the other part of that as well is equity, because retrofitting low-income homes is often more expensive, and so it's not a great bang for the buck, but those are the folks who need it the most. So also with that shift, also looking at how we can be encouraging more equity or equitable outcomes from Efficiency Vermont. So that's one thing. And he did also mention supporting low-income weatherization. He wanted to take money from Efficiency Vermont to do that. I would like to see if we can find some other source for that work, because I think that's also really important. He mentioned, removing the private right of action. It's actually not a private right. It's a citizen suit from the Global Warming Solutions Act. I am not in favor of doing that. We're not going to go backwards. We cannot go backwards on climate. And so I think we need to continue to work together to find those solutions. I think, we may not make the huge kinds of strides that I would like to be making on climate this session, but we can at least be planting the seeds and doing the work so that we're in a good position to move on something perhaps in a couple of years.
On the transportation front, I think there's still a lot we could do. We did have a lot of federal money that we use for incentives, but the agency is still dedicated to this transition to an electric transportation sector. We're probably not going to make as much progress as we've made or as fast, but I still think we made enough progress that we're not going to, kind of go backwards. It might not be as fast as we had hoped. Part of that will be how much the Trump administration is able to really turn the faucet off, because we had a lot of money promised to the state for some of this work, like a lot more electric charging stations going in. It's kind of all planned. They had contracts. So we'll see if that happens. But even if that doesn't happen, I think we're going to make incremental progress. But I'm encouraged in the first couple weeks of the session, the people from the Agency of Transportation that have come in have said, regardless that we didn't put any money in the budget from the governor for more electrification incentives, we're still following through on our plan to slowly move our vehicle fleet over to electric cars, and figuring out the way to make that happen. So there's a lot of opportunity with other forms of public transportation, and like the Gopher service in Barrie that's happening, and on-demand services in rural areas, because it's hard to have a fixed bus service in areas like this. So just on-demand services that are kind of on a nonprofit model work. We're still trying to doing those pilots, so that could have a climate benefit and also just a transportation benefit for Vermonters, which is essential. So I'm kind of on the climate front. I'm focused on the transportation stuff, and looking forward to the leadership of Senator Watson and other things you can do there.
Excuse me. This is the one issue that my committee doesn't deal with, so I'm happy. The numbers changed. There's a 3-vote majority in the Senate. We don't have the votes to override a veto. That's going to force us to move forward, but to be more collaborative, be perhaps a little more sensitive to people's fear right now about affordability. We can't do much about the cost of groceries or fuel, but I think that's what you're going to see. We're going to move forward, but we're going to have to be, we probably won't be able, we'll take steps, not leaps, and that will, but we will keep moving forward.
Thank you. There are far more people knowledgeable than I am on climate issues in the House and in the Senate, and I've learned to follow the advice of wise people, which I intend to do. But what I'm going to focus on is something I know a little about. That's food. Now you may be thinking, what does food have to do with climate? 85% of the food that comes to our state comes from outside of our borders. And because of climate change, those food sources are being and will be threatened even more than they have been. I want to work with Vermont and try to be a catalyst of sorts with our Ag Committee to have a New England consortium to focus together on growing our own food. There are places in Europe with a colder or as cold temperature that we have that do much more with their own production of food. It's an area I want to work on because I know it's a threat.
Yes. Glad it done that.
Thank you for being here tonight. I don't want you to take my comments personally, because I'm not upset or anything, but and Senator Cummings, I'm not living in fear of taxes. Okay, I do think Vermonters are overtaxed, and we've got big issues looming. Climate change has already been mentioned, and I would add to that health care, or issues in health care, and I would add to that food. As many know here, I've done a tremendous flip over. I no longer need drugs from Big Pharma. I've changed my lifestyle, my diet, everything, and I am concerned about food, because our food supply is poisoned when you get into processed foods. I just want to mention, include regenerative farming in your discussions on food, because that is climate kind to do regenerative farming. Along the healthcare front, I have Medicare, you got the right one, and I have Blue Cross Blue Shield, My husband is a retired state employee. It is a Cadillac insurance policy. Unfortunately, the things I need for health care sometimes, they don't cover. Why? Because I'm not on the monthly subscription fee for medications that make a big corporation money. I do other things, like I want to see a naturopath and I want to get a test done to see what my vitamins and my minerals and all of those things, and I have to go through so many hoops to get through Medicare to Blue Cross Blue Shield, who will pay for it if I can get all the people put in the right paperwork. So, and the third issue that I'm concerned about is education, and it's the one I know the most about. And the educational system we have in Vermont is too expensive. And going to 5 districts might help for a year or two, and then the costs are going to go up. Woodbury used to have 15 school districts in it back in the 1800s. Now we're part of a 5-town district. And I know there are issues. I've been talking to parents in town, about what's going on in the schools. And they're ready to walk. Some of them can't. So, you've got all these systems, and I know, Senator Polchak, you remember me, I served on the after-school committee with you, and this is an example of what concerns me about these systems that they studied. Was it Finland or the Netherlands? I can't remember which country. Finland. They studied the after-school program, and the Finns put out, here's why it was successful. And I mentioned this in our committee. I said when it got to here, and people in the district in Vermont who was going to put in this after-school program, we're going to do what Finland did. And I'm going, no, you're not. Because one of the key features that Finland said, this is why our after-school program works, is because we got parents involved. We paid parents to do sports with their kids, to go to museums with their kids, to do things with their kids. That's how come these kids were doing so well. But this was missing in what we're doing in Vermont. In other words, we have an after-school program, which I agree, we need them, but it's just not the same. We need to get parents involved. So when we talk about these systems, this is my concern. It's the system. If money could solve this, we would have solved it already. These systems need to be fundamentally changed. And going to 5 districts isn't fundamentally changing anything. It is, yes, economies of scale, yes, all the things. I've been in a ton of meetings at the Montpelier and the education department, all that over the past 30 years. Yeah, I get it all. And I understand the system, that this building that we're sitting in. This is an amazing building. And a really cool school could be here. Now, I want the teachers to know they work hard and I respect what they do here. And they can do that in a different system and probably get more satisfaction out of their job. So when it comes to taxes, I am pleading with you, please stop taxing us for broken systems. We need to change them, and you gotta think outside the box. And I'm going to mention something that, people don't like, school choice. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm a firm believer that the parents need to be deciding where their kids to go to school and how their kids are taught. And if we're going to include the taxpayers in it, they get to pay for it. But and this gets to my taxes. I wouldn't mind the taxes that I'm paying now if it actually worked. We have a drug problem. We have children in school who are hungry. We have children in school who are afraid. There's all kinds of things going on that these kids can't learn. And we need to change how we do things. And I've sat in a lot of committees at the State House, and I don't know how you all can do that. I don't know what it would take to get these structures changed. But I have always long advocated for Vermont having one school district, one. And within that school district, parents could choose from whatever school they wanted to get their kids to. And yes, transportation might be an issue. Well, let's solve that. Let's not use that as an excuse to not change the system. So I think that about covers it. I'm pleading, let's change the systems. And, I know, Senator Cummings, you worked on a program this summer with over education. Yeah, the public education system has got to change. It can't keep structured like it is now because it's going to collapse on itself. And anyway, I think I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Any response? Yes.
You want me to answer? I think we probably can agree that there's a problem. Our test scores are not what they once were. Some of it is a national problem. We haven't recovered from COVID. There's mental health issues in our school that weren't there when my kids went to school, and that they seem to coincide with the advent of social media. We've had testimony on that. We're trying to take away phones in school, but they tell me the parents are the biggest problem because they want to be able to talk to their kids. So we have ways to go. I think, yes. You know, some of us are still remembering the trauma of last year and the 18% increase in the cost of education. Those kinds of tax increases are, I'm convinced, are causing increase in homelessness because as taxes go up, so don't rent. You might hold out and pay your taxes. Last year, we raised 70 million in unanticipated revenue and did 30 million in taxes to buy your rate down to what was a totally unhappy and unpopular 13.89%, somewhere in there. But we're looking at close to another 6%, we think, this year. We have to get a handle on it. That is the only tax they've ever let me raise. I mean, you know, no one complains about their income tax. It is the property tax that has continued to go up. The governor has given us at least the outlines of not your ideal system, but a much larger, and they say much more affordable system. There are national standards for the numbers of teachers per student. We can't, you know, and our students are suffering because we can't afford to pay a teacher to teach a foreign language to 5 kids, not and pay your teacher a living or decent wage. We can't afford the health insurance to pay a teacher or the pension. We're putting hundreds of millions of dollars into the pension funds to make up for being bad in the past and not fully funding them. And we're going to be doing that for quite a few years. So we've reached a tipping point. We've reached a point where our children are not getting the education they deserve. We have kids who get green and gold full scholarships to UVM, and they can't accept them because they don't have the classes, foreign language, whatever. Some kids can do it because they have parents who make sure they take those classes online, but their schools aren't offering the classes they need to take a scholarship. So we need to make sure that every child has the education they need, and that includes technical, career education. But we've got to find a way to do it that is affordable so that people can afford to live here. We are between the cost of housing, and your taxes go into the cost of housing. I haven't talked to a school or a business or a medical facility that isn't critically short-staffed right now. Nobody is adequately staffed, and that's just adding to everyone's stress. So we have some big challenges ahead of us, and there's going to be a lot of ideas floated. We are still trying to understand the governor's proposal and what it means for individual school districts. He is not proposing to close schools at this point. Not directly. But you may find out that you can't keep your school open with the financing structure. We still are not clear on that. And we're not clear who's going to make the decisions about what that is. So we have a long way to go, but I think if we're going to move forward and we're going to have vital communities in which people of different incomes and different skills can afford to live, we're going to have to make some hard decisions. I've always said that Vermont walked a very thin line between being a state where people can live and a theme park where people can visit. A few people can afford to live here, but everybody else comes and sees the way it used to be with the quaint villages and the beautiful mountains. We need to preserve the villages and the mountains and the forests and everything else, but we need to also make sure that people can afford to live there and enjoy them, not just the rich and the rest of us can visit.
Yeah, Rita, I think everybody in the State House basically agrees that there's a major problem with education. And so far, everybody seems to be pointing in the same direction, that it isn't just how we fund it, but the whole system needs some pretty major changes. Because at some point, some people are just like, well, let's just switch to an income tax, which I support in some regards, but it's not going to fix the underlying problem that we're talking about. So in that regard, there's an opportunity to make big changes. The governor's plan talked about 5 districts, but he also has a plan about 10 districts. Like, how many districts isn't going to be the biggest thing, but it's definitely, I think, the switch back to a foundation formula, which we used to have before Brigham, seems to be the way it would go. And then Senator Cummings says, how do the smaller schools like this one afford to have a school with a foundation formula? And what does that mean for the town? And how does that go forward? That's the work that Senator Cummings and her committee is going to be working on in the Education Committee. But the 2 committees in the Senate, Education and Finance, are working together. And I've seen more cooperation between the House and the Senate than I've seen before. And like I said, between the governor and the legislature. So I don't know what the big changes is going to be, but I think we are going to see some pretty major changes to our education system. We put the $69 million in last year to help bring down the taxes, even though it was too high. There's an effort. We have some excess revenue from fiscal year 24 that the governor proposed to use to bring down the taxes. But you can only do that so many times and you run out of money. So we have to make this fundamental change, or just the taxes will be, like Senator Cummings, it makes it unaffordable just to live and work here if you have to pay those kind of taxes. And we do need to be curious about how other states are able to do it, because you go to other states and you don't say like, oh my God, it's horrible here. So and they have lower taxes. So we have to look at that and figure out what we can do to make it more affordable to live here. And it's interesting how that discussion has changed over the years. And the way I like to focus on it is affordable for who. And I think we've done a good job of making it affordable for the most vulnerable. We just need to try to move that up the income level to the middle class kind of folks.
Yeah, I want to focus on the part of your question that overlaps healthcare with education, because one of the drivers, I mean, there are many drivers for the cost of education right now, but one of them is healthcare. And this is one where I feel like I should be turning to Patrick to be like, you can fact check me, see if I'm saying anything wrong here. But my understanding is that reference-based pricing has the potential to help stabilize or bring down some healthcare costs, and there is a bill in the Senate right now to look at that. And there's a great report by the auditor on reference-based pricing, which, if we were able to do that, it would help education costs and it would help our healthcare costs as individuals. So to have prices pegged to some percentage of Medicare. So it may not affect folks who are on Medicare particularly, but at least having some kind of reference for how expensive different procedures ought to be may not help with the prescriptions, but just thinking about the system in general. And coming back to the idea of consolidation. So I am a teacher. That's my day job. I teach high school science and math. And I teach in the Montpelier Roxbury School District. And if somebody said that Montpelier had to merge with U32, I would be like, okay, we will make it work. This is long overdue. But I'm not sure that I am ready for 5 districts. I'm not sure if I'm ready for 10 districts. But I think there's space for that conversation, especially when you consider, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but thinking about, we have the capacity for significantly more students than we actually have in our system. So I think that is worth thinking about and being strategic about.
I think I'll start with the next question. I don't want to just ditto everything that just been said, unless you want to hear more of it. Is there another?
Yeah. The next question or comment? Yes. Oh, Lisa Flood.
So just in terms of creativity, like I try to look at it as what would best serve families, and that's the thing that's most important, and then figure out like how to make it work. So from my perspective, we have a childcare crisis. People can't, I was a registered daycare provider partly because I couldn't find childcare. That's 35 years ago. My grandchildren, my kids are having the same issue. So we have these great schools. We don't have enough students. Isn't there a way to serve both those functions with our education system? And I don't know if that's not possible. Like, are there birth to, kindergarten educators that can be hired, and the school buildings can provide that, and we provide subsidies for childcare, but can't that be put into our schools? So that's what I'm wondering, like, has that ever been proposed? And is that possible? And would that help, or even just stay the same?
So let me, my wife also was a child care provider at home, perhaps for some of the same reasons, and about the same number of years ago. Who will make the decisions for what we have tomorrow? Will it be a centralized decision-making in Montpelier? Or will it be distributed, a localized model? Because that's one of the questions that's going to come down. So I think that creativity you seek can happen. I'm more inclined to think it would happen at the local level. And I think we'll end up with a hybrid. But I'm not yet comfortable. Focus on the word yet. I'm still listening to all sides. I'm not yet comfortable that a centralized decision-making should decide which schools stay open, small schools, because they're choice or necessity. I have no desire to bus elementary students. I think they're too young. Beyond that, I think it's an open question. But I think these are the governor in his speech on the budget said, I'm paraphrasing him, but let's be brave together. And it was shortly after he said we need to right-size our schools. Some of you might recall. I mean, that's code for shrinking things. I don't mind downsizing, but right now, and I'm not just saying this because it's politically correct in front of a bunch of local citizens, right? But I'm more inclined to let the local people make that decision. It's a profound decision, and I don't think Montpelier should make it. I will balance that against the cost, because I think I have to. we'll probably do well this year to significantly decrease the 5.9% property tax. Might bring it all the way down on average, but reduce that with one-time money. That should buy us some time. And I think you're right. By consolidating and having less business managers and less this and less that and economies of scale, we might buy another year or two, but there have to be real ideas on how you do this or that will run out. I'm not yet comfortable saying, here's what your teacher-student ratio should be. I think one size fits all generally is not a successful strategy, but I'll listen.
I think I'm still chewing on the thought of like, how do we get to what you are suggesting? Because I feel like if we were designing an education system from scratch, in my ideal world, the education system ought to go all the way down to, birth as an option, right? Like some people may want to stay home with their kid. Fair enough. Like, love that, fully support it. But that's not the system that we have. And so the push to move towards universal pre-K, I think, moves in the direction that you are suggesting, and I think it's just hard to disrupt a system that is somewhat well established, but at least we're making progress with the child care payroll tax to help support educators of the birth to 3 or 4 a year old birth to 5-year-olds, which has just been so challenging. And I feel like I'm going to pass this off because I feel like you all know more about that than I do.
Well, we are making progress. It is still not a good system, the child care system that we have. There's still a lot of people struggling to find it and paying, Ivy League college education for their child care. But we did pass the bill 2 years ago. The payroll tax is now being collected. We put a lot of general fund money in last 2 years to kind of get it going. And so we're just starting to see those effects of new slots opening, families realizing that they can get the subsidy because we raised the level of income for somebody to get a subsidy. So a lot of people they thought they made too much money, so they haven't applied. But it's definitely needed that they get the subsidy, and that's what it's for, so then that the child care providers can get paid more and the child care facilities can be better run. And I was at a meeting at the Barry School District, and they were really worried about universal pre-K being forced upon them in the school because they were like, we don't have a space in here for the rules around preschoolers because you need different sized toilets and you need this and you need different rules and regulations that they were like, we don't really have it. And our home child care centers and other centers in the community are working really well, and we don't want to take that away from them. So I kind of like what Rita was saying is let the parents decide what's the best child care, and that's what the systems we set up. Some of it could be in schools, and some schools could do a great job of it, and I think we should definitely support that. But I wouldn't want to say schools have to do it, because I think there's community opportunities that would be better meet the parents and meet the children, and I agree with you that we should focus on the families, what's best for the families first.
Yeah, we did put in a child care subsidy. The governor has not funded it completely didn't do it this year either, and he didn't do your community-based services. He didn't give them any cost of living increase. Yes. So, and this is, I think, the second year he's done that. It's somewhat frustrating. We did this, but now, like with housing, we've done all kinds of things, but we're waiting for the private sector, the market, to step up, and that takes time. You have to have people open the child care centers and take advantage. You have to have parents take advantage of the help that's there. And, the foundation is there, but we need people to build on it. And that is a challenge for us. I believe the proposal, as I understand it, but I'm still understanding it, the governor's proposal does envision pre-K. There's weights and there's subsidies in there that include valuation for pre-K students. Now, we have schools that do pre-K, and that's caused some financial difficulties for the centers left with the more expensive infants, young children. So we're going to have to figure out that balance. Is he saying every school is going to do pre-K, and then we've got schools with 4 kindergartners. Are you going to have a pre-K and you've got 2 kids? Our school-age population has been dropping for 20 years, and it doesn't look like it's going to pick up anytime soon. We have the lowest birth rate in the country, and I don't know if we're first or second oldest at this point, but I'm not seeing a lot of young, unwrinkled faces around this room, maybe 1 or 2. But we are an aging population, and that our demographics are playing a role in our financials. And we do have to have housing. We have to have good jobs. We have to have affordable property taxes goes into the price of housing. And we're starting to see some unpleasant movement in homeowners insurance, given all the costs nationally. I can't do anything about the cost of food unless we can all grow it here, but I went into shock over the $7 tomato at the farmer's market. So all of these things they interact and they hang together, and there is real collegiality, I think, so far in the legislature. I have a committee that has 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats and me. So either we're all going to work together or I'm going to make all the decisions, and I've told them that. They can just go home. But because it's set up, and I won't deliver out a major bill like education on a 3-4 vote. It's just too important. I've got to get buy-in from everyone. So you're going to see sausage making at the finest, which is the way I've heard democracy. But that really is. Everybody is involved in things, and somehow it all comes together. And hopefully we will do that this year.
So Patrick first. Norm Etkind, yes?
Hello, and I also like to thank all of you for coming here. I'm sure it's a rather busy time for all of you. We really appreciate that. So the thing I'd like to talk about tonight is what's going on with rural Vermont and permitting. And a lot of work's been done last session. You hear a lot about the Act 250 bill, but it also contained provisions about what happens with rural lands. And the Fish and Wildlife put together the Vermont Conservation Design, and the maps are available online. Almost a large share of rural Vermont is covered in that design in what they consider to be high priority areas which will need special permits. And what we're hearing lately is that it's going to be Act 250 permits that will be necessary to build even a single family home on anything that's included within that. I'm hoping that that's not the case. I'd like to see, I think it's a good idea to be able to look at all those properties and to do good things with them, as long as the permitting is a reasonable process. Act 250 would not be for that purpose, and I'm hoping that there's a more reasonable way to do that. So that's my question, comment.
Thank you.
Yes, happy to talk about that. So just to, if folks are not aware of the bill that we passed last session, it was kind of a grand bargain that was struck between folks advocating for more housing and folks wanting better protections for environmentally sensitive or fragile places. And what that ended up meaning was that there were, we created sort of 3 designations for locations. There were what we would call tier 1, tier 2, well, yeah, there's 3. So tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And so tier 1 was, places that had access to water and sewer. They had robust bylaws where there was a lot of duplication between Act 250 regulation and the local zoning regulations. And so in an effort to make it not so duplicative, reduced the theory is that we would be reducing the requirements for Act 250 in such places. And recognizing that everywhere doesn't have access to water and sewer, we created a tier 1A and a tier 1B. So if you're 1B, then that means that it's a place that has access to either water or sewer, or sufficient soils to provide drainage. Which hopefully opens it up to a lot more places. Tier 2 was sort of Act 250 as it exists now, and then because there are a lot of communities that depend on Act 250 as sort of like a backstop for zoning, and then Tier 3, as it was envisioned, were places that had some kind of either ecological or environmental importance that needed perhaps more protection. And just because we've had this conversation, the Vermont Conservation Design maps that Norm was referencing, it really it looks at forest blocks and places. It maps out places in Vermont that would be a high priority for conservation, and it is a lot of the area of the map of Vermont, and I recognize that could be very concerning. So just to put it in context, this process of determining where the 1A and 1B places are, where the tier 3, ecologically sensitive places are, those are all in process, right? So the efforts have already gone underway to figure out what those maps would look like. And actually, the 1A and 1B processes are a little bit further ahead than Tier 3, which was left much more open. And so there's going to be a lot more, there's more to be fleshed out for what the Tier 3 places requirements look like. So, and that was in part left open on purpose so that we could have this dialogue and treat places differently as they needed to be treated. That like a area right around a cedar swamp may have different needs than say a place that is likely to erode because of steep slopes or something. So all that is to say, I absolutely hear your concern about, if you have property that could be considered, ecologically sensitive. And I guess what I would say to that is that it's going to be a lot of process around getting to that point. And so there should be lots of opportunity for input. And the hope is that even with the forest blocks, it's not that we would want to prevent development, but that maybe it's not right in the middle of the forest block. Like if it can be sort of in places that do the least amount of environmental either damage or impact on that space, so that ideally you can keep a forest block connected. And I feel like there's also something in that question as well. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, and then I'll stop. But there's also something there about the Act 250 process itself. And one of the things that we have heard from a lot of folks is that there is just a real fear of appeal, that appeals to Act 250 permits can be project stopping, and that's very concerning. one of the reasons that they are project stopping is because they take so long, and they can also be very expensive. Even the Act 250 process itself can be to get all the permits. Well, actually, I should back up. The Act 250 permit itself is probably not super expensive. It's all the permits that are underneath it that are expensive. So all that is to say, at least for the appeals process, one would hope that we can make the justice process swift, right? So that an appeal is not a weapon to kill a project. So that's something that I'm very interested in working on. I'm going to be very interested to see that the process of Tier 3 does not impede development in a town like Woodbury. Like, we want to make sure that that you all are able to develop and take advantage of the opportunities, and it's something that I want to be vigilant about as we move forward, because it has to work for our rural and small communities.
Yes. Any other questions? We'll come back to. I'll come back to you, Patrick. I'll go around and make sure everyone has one comment. Diana Peduzzi. Yes.
Just wanted to point out to Ann that the appeal process for local permits is often worse, more locally problematic, and not scientifically based. And so, anyway.
Patrick Flood. Yeah.
So, I would hate to end the night without talking about healthcare. I've been involved in the healthcare situation in Vermont now for a long, long time, professionally and as a volunteer. Our healthcare system is actually collapsing. I was talking to Senator Cummings and Senator Perchlik before the meeting started, and I know healthcare is an incredibly complex topic, and people have a hard time understanding it. But let me just assure everybody in the room, we have plenty of money in our healthcare system. That is not the problem. We spend over $6.2 billion on healthcare in this state for 600,000 people, which makes us one of the most expensive places in the world. I am not exaggerating, on a per capita basis. One of the most, and so you have this system that costs so much, and yet people can't get a primary care doctor. The quality of care is deteriorating in a number of settings. Mental health is a complete disaster. I just learned this week how bad the situation was with our federally qualified health centers, and that's what the Hardwick Health Center is a federally qualified health center. And a number of them are on the brink of bankruptcy. So our system is collapsing, and yet we have a ton of money. In a way, it's kind of like what Retta was saying about the education system. You know, you don't mind paying taxes if the system works. And our system is not working in healthcare. So I'm curious what you folks think we can do. I will just say, because I think it's really important to say, that all the money is tied up in our hospitals, and is primarily tied up in the UVM Medical Center, where their costs are twice what the costs are even at Dartmouth. Makes no sense. A study was recently done comparing the UVM Medical Center to similarly sized teaching hospitals all over the country, and by far and away, UVM is the most expensive, and by a lot, not by a dollar or two, but by hundreds of dollars per operation or per treatment. So we have to find a way to redirect money from the hospitals, primarily UVM, to primary care, mental health, home health, and the things that keep people healthy and out of the hospitals. It's just plain common sense. And we've not done that for well over a decade, and we have got to find a way to do that, or people will continue not to get care. I mean, literally, people are dying in this state because they cannot get in to see a doctor or a specialist in a timely fashion. So, having made that big speech, I'm wondering what you folks think we can do. I would just say quickly to second what Senator Watson was saying, what she mentioned was a process called reference-based pricing, and basically what it means is the state would tell the insurance company, the hospitals, that they can't charge more than, say, 200% of what Medicare pays. That's the way to understand it. And because right now we pay 300% and 400% of what Medicare pays. Reference-based pricing basically means the prices that the hospitals would charge for treatments or services could not exceed, say, pick a number, but let's just say 200% of what Medicare pays. So if Medicare pays $1,000 for, you know, some kind of X-ray, then the hospitals could not charge more than $2,000, right? And so it's basically a way of capping hospital prices. And if you do that, you save a lot of money. And you'd think right away, oh, the hospitals will all go broke. No, they won't. We have data that shows in other states that have done this that, in fact, the hospitals do not go broke. That a place like UVM can afford to do that. Anyway, so that is one idea on the table. And if you did that, you could take basically, it's not simple, but you could take the money that is being spent on expensive hospital administration and move it over to primary care, stuff like that. Anyway, I'm sorry to talk for so long, but I really want to hear what you folks think is possible.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. And like Dave said earlier, I don't know a lot about this topic, so I listen to wise counsel, like people like you that have thought about it and worked in it for a long time. But what I've learned in the last year that I've been trying to learn more about it is I feel like we need to strengthen the Green Mountain Care Board. I think we need strong regulators. I think even the ones that are there agree that it didn't get off to the greatest start. It got captured probably by the hospitals. I think there's an argument that the legislature was captured by the hospitals. I mean, because people love their local hospital and they're doing good work. They're saving people's lives. And so people don't, it's kind of like a local school. They don't want to be against it. But I think there has been some kind of regulatory capture there that has got us into this position where we were once the lowest priced and now we're the highest priced in the nation, which makes us the highest priced in the world, as you pointed out. So reference-based pricing, the Care Board issued a report. They say we have to do it gradually, so I think that is something we can start on. But I think the Care Board needs more authority to make these kind of tough choices. And we probably also need to split them up a little bit so that there's like a separate healthcare planning effort that's not also there. So they're not both the advocates for healthcare and the judges on the rates and everything. So I'm hopeful that we can make some changes to that. And that's kind of a long-term solution, but that's where we start, yeah.
Yeah, it's our federally qualified healthcare. One of them is on the brink of bankruptcy or declaring bankruptcy. Most of them are in financial difficulty. Our prime insurance carrier, Blue Cross Blue Shield, the number they had for us was for every dollar they took in premiums, they paid out $1.11 in cost. They haven't gotten, because the Green Mountain Care Board's trying to control the cost, they haven't gotten the increase they need to keep their reserves up. They did this year because the Department of Financial Regulation has said they're down below the area where they're required to have reserves, so they're sure that they have the money to pay the claims as they come in. Our smaller rural hospitals we almost had Springfield go bankrupt. They're not doing obstetrics. You go into labor, you got to drive to Rutland in a snowstorm. That makes me a little nervous. And that will be next on the list because it's very expensive. We aren't having very many babies, but you have to have an OBGYN and a trained nurse on 24/7 because babies don't come during business hours. So our small rural hospitals, I think reference-based pricing has a lot to offer. It probably will get the attention of our main hospital. What it will do to the small rural hospitals, I think we have to look at. I was hopeful. The federal government finally said they were going to do some pharmaceutical negotiations for Medicare. That's now been ended. We pay the highest per person for health care in the world. We are lowest in the industrialized world in our healthcare outcomes. We pay more. My son lives in Montreal. He has free health care. He doesn't pay when he goes to the doctor. But he pays 53% of his income in taxes. And that's what every other nation that provides paid family leave, child care, health care, all of those things that we want. We've come to the brink of proposing single-payer health care twice. Both times the bill has come in and the political leader in charge has pulled it because the cost, there is no silver bullet out there. Other people, you pay, but you spread the cost out over everyone and you do it. We can't talk about that in this country. We hate taxes. And so we are struggling to provide good health care at a cost we can afford, you know, kind of as step by step rather than having an entire system. And that makes it hard. We are going to have to get a control. And the elephant in the room is UVMC. They have bought out in the areas around us most of the private practices. We've tried to get a handle on it. The insurance companies pay a premium if you're a teaching hospital. So if your doctor, you were seeing him for $90 and the next day it was $290. He was taken over by the hospital. They're doing all his billing and, you know, setting stuff up for him. But you're being charged a $200 fee to set your foot in the door. It's called the facilities fee. And can't blame the doctor. He wants to have a life too, not being called in the middle of the night. But it has definitely added to the cost, and they've just raked in such a large portion of the healthcare system that they're pretty hard to fight because you need health care. You can't go on strike and shut them down and say, well, I just will put my dialysis off for a week, or my heart attack. So they've got us in a hard place. And yeah, we're going to have to find a way to push back.
I worked for the Vermont Hospital Association for 2 years, Director of Government Operations. I was chair of the Public Oversight Commission for 4 years, setting hospital budgets. Was on a local hospital board of directors for 12 years. I'm currently on the board of directors of a faltering federally qualified healthcare center. I worked 6 years at a home health agency on their board of directors. I know about these issues. I don't pretend to be an expert. I want to talk to you briefly, though, not about acute care, not about primary care, but about long-term care. That system is in great danger. We have 32 nursing homes today. When Patrick and I worked on this, there were 50. In the late 60s, early 70s, there were 100. But now we're down to 32. Last year, 16 of those homes all received extraordinary financial relief to prevent them from closing. This year, we're about to appropriate, in what's called the budget adjustment, $21 million so that 10 different homes can get extraordinary relief, because the test is whether you're about to close or not. And yet, while this happens, more and more people, some extra 77,000 bed days, are going into nursing homes. Why? Because the folks in the community in their homes getting the help are only getting 59% of the care they've been authorized to have to stay at home. If you hired someone to plow your driveway and they stopped at 59% and drove off, you'd be upset. If you hired someone to paint your house and they did 59%, you'd say, what's going on? If you went to get a haircut or the beautician and they stopped at 59%, you'd say, what is going on? But if you're home, hoping to get care to bathe you, to dress you, to feed you, to comb your hair, to brush your teeth, to move you from bed to chair, do all those activities of daily living, and you only get 59% of the help. Instead of getting 40 hours a week, you get roughly 20, half a loaf. You go to the nursing home. That's the consequence, and that's why the census is starting to go up. Why, you might ask, are people only getting a portion of what they've been authorized for? Because the wages are suppressed. Our governor, I'm not meaning to criticize him personally, don't get me wrong, but in the 9 budgets he's presented to the legislature, his first 9 budgets, only 1 budget out of 9 included a modest cost of living increase for the caregivers taking care of our parents and our spouses and our loved ones. The legislature has worked hard somehow, it's like pulling a tooth without Novocaine, to come up with the money to fund them, but the wage rate is $14.75 an hour to do this work. People are paid more to turn burgers than they are to turn our loved ones. We need to put our money where our collective values are and pay these caregivers a sufficient wage so that they have the human rights and dignity they prefer. The system is about to go under, and I don't exaggerate. We study this very closely. We must make a solid investment into home care, and we can do that. The dollars are there. Whether we do J-Talk, I'm looking at the senator being funny now because he knows what that means. You know, there's 20 million here, there's 10 million, there's a lot of money. But I, for one, will not sit idly by while people are forced to leave their homes when they don't want to.
Yes, okay, Retta, yep, Retta Dunlop.
Thank you. I've enjoyed listening. 3- and 4-year-olds getting on a bus without a seatbelt to go to Lakeview School is scary. This district here, elementary district here, wants to turn our Lakewood School into a child care facility, basically. Mom has to put her child in a car seat, drive them to this building, leave the child. They will then put the child on a bus with no seatbelts or car seats. I'm just stunned. But something you said, Senator Perlchik, about what to do. Most people know I was a homeschooler, and I'm still working in the homeschooling community, helping homeschooling parents, so I still hear all the reasons why they leave a public school. And we're talking about these systems, and I want to encourage you to go even further than what I've heard you do here today. I'm asked, really go outside that box, and here's an example of that. I firmly believe we have enough talent in just this room to educate the children in this school without teachers' licenses. Now, I want to say something to the teachers. Thank God you do what you do. We need teachers. And there needs to be some kind of licensure or something to make sure that, because they're going into a classroom paid by tax dollars where there's no parents. We got to know there's some system to say they're okay to go do that. I mean, last year I taught at a homeschool co-op on Wednesdays, and I paid for my own background check, and I had to take a course to teach literature and logic to the kids 1 day a week. So there needs to be some kind of credentialing going on, but we need to start thinking outside that box, because I'm sure Myrna here can teach Spanish to children without a teacher's license because she knows Spanish. I'm from the homeschooling movement. I've got moms and dads all over the state teaching their kids all the way through high school without teacher's certificates. not to bash teacher certificates, but we could have teachers in these schools and volunteers coming in. You could even hire them to teach art, to teach music. There's no reason a child should miss a foreign language for their college application. That, you know, you got a native speaker, bring them in and have them teach the kids what they know. Because we all taught our kids how to dress and talk and eat and say please and thank you. Why is reading different? It's not. So that's the kind of out-of-the-box thinking I'm trying to encourage you to do, is that we have to get away from all of these regulations. These public schools are regulated to the hilt, and we need to take it about 50% and wipe it off. Let these teachers teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, and leave it at that. And we would have such a better education. So, you know, it just, another thing I'm hearing you say is, we as legislators, we got to, you know, more regulation here, less there, more. What forces can you put into this? Because what you're doing now no fault for trying, it's not working. I think you need to put some of this back in the hands of the people. I should be able to go to a hospital and be able to punish them. Oh, your CAT scan is $2,000. Well, this hospital over here is $1,000. I'm going to spend my money over here. That's going to force them to lower their costs. So I think there's some market forces here that we could put into play. Yes, free market, but you don't have to go Wild West free market. That's what laws and regulations are for, is to manage these markets, but not control them. And I think you're trying to control them. Let the people control them and help them do it. That's kind of the out-of-the-box thinking I'd like to see the legislature go in, because I don't know what we're going to do. This is all going to collapse if we don't do something vastly different. Thank you for listening to me.
Yes, we have a couple more questions of Patrick, and then back to me. Oh.
At school board for 13 years, both elementary and high school. And I completely agree, we need to reduce the reporting and administrative requirements for our schools. Every principal, every superintendent I ever spoke to said, we get new requirements every year, we get no money to do it, it ends up on the property tax. So I think there's a lot of efficiency to be gained, but that's the main point I wanted to make was, you can't, there's no way you can fix the fundamental underlying problems in the education system overnight. It's just not going to happen. And I think Retta is onto something about, and it goes to what Dave was saying about local control. That's a fraught phrase. I just think that to figure out what works best, we may have to give some flexibility to school districts and let them experiment with models that may be more efficient and more effective. Because I think the people who work in the system have lots of ideas about how to make it better. I don't know if that includes Senator Watson, but and what's good for high school and what's good for Burlington is different than what's good for Woodbury, and I think we should just recognize that and give some thought to let a few districts try a different model. I'll tell you, I'm going to try to make this very quick. When Act 46 passed, I was opposed to it because I knew what we were going to end up doing. We were going to end up doing exactly what we're doing in this district right now. We're fighting over what schools should close. And I don't think that's right. And we went to the Secretary of Education at that time, the schools in this district, and we said, don't force us to merge. Let us come to you with a plan. And we sat there for an hour with the secretary, and we told her how we had decided this school would do this, that school would do that, and we would all work together in an integrated fashion. And, well, she was fascinated, but we didn't get the permission. But I think districts and towns would like to try to work out these things and not fight with each other. It just creates so much ill will when there may be a better way. So I'm in favor of the idea of more, if local control means being creative under an umbrella of oversight. maybe we should start trying that, because everything we've tried so far just gets more and more expensive.
Yes.
Pass the baton here. I'm not an expert on healthcare, and so I'll make this really quick, and something that Patrick's heard before, that, when UVM came up with adding a whole new system, actually what I'm talking about is when they added 2 helicopter services. And the question came up about whether the care board would analyze that and so forth. They came up with a decision saying they did not have authority to do that. So I'm wondering if there needs to be some kind of legislative fix to give them the proper authority. But that winds up being a massive cost, and whether it was, and it may be justified, it may not be, but we don't know because it was never looked into. We have no idea what it costs or anything. So that's a quick comment.
Yeah, well, it goes to my overall point that I think the Green Mountain Care Board is ripe for an overhaul on its what powers it has and what its role is. And that would be one of many examples.
Any other questions or comments? Yes. Myrna Miranda O'Neill.
Thank you for being here. I just want to put my former teacher hat on for a minute and make a comment that all these ideas are very good about innovative ideas, but it's also good to acknowledge that there is a system that has very, very good things happening, has many challenges, but one of the, like in my personal experience, when we had a principal that said, here's what we have to do. This is a state mandate, but I want you to come with me with ideas. What do we have to do to meet the students' need and to also fulfill the mandates and the standards? And when we had that freedom, teachers are very creative. And we came up with things that were very innovative, and that worked fine. Now, if the leadership changed and we had a principal that was more restrictive or just didn't value that people had minds and ideas, then that it was more like from the top down and just do this. And it became rote and numbers and a lot of waste. So there's some wisdom with tweaking. You don't have to throw away everything, but do look into your local resources and empower teachers and principals to say, here's how we fix the problem. Because you have so much experience with the people that are in the system now and their education that you don't want to scrape that away and start, all over again. So there's one thing. I admire very much this school when they do their environmental education and a lot of hands-on, lots of community people, some of them are right here, coming to the school. They don't get compensated. They do it because they support their community. And teachers that go outside of their hours, they don't get compensated either. They do it because they have that commitment. Maybe that's where the tweaking needs to start so that people do get compensated for that. On the healthcare, yes, there's a lot of waste. I get papers and papers of things I would have to sit down for hours to understand what it means. I go in trust, stay healthy, don't go because you don't know how much it's gonna cost you kind of thing. But the reality is, as Rita mentioned, there are many other ways to seeing a problem, a health problem. And we have many local practitioners that have studied other ways of treating certain, it's not the traditional way. The use of midwife, the use of nurse midwife, the use of herbalist. So there's a way, but if you try to go out of that system, you're going to pay more money because they're not going to cover that. So maybe Vermont could tweak a program that, yes, when you need a certain type of scan, you have to go get that. But when you could have other people treat the same situation and help you understand the root cause of the problem, that could be very good for everyone. But thank you.
Well, we are nearing the end of our gathering here. And on this cold, dark winter night, I'd like to ask each of you to send us out on a positive note. And I ask you to tell us, what are you optimistic about or hopeful about? And it could be legislatively or personally. So it's wide open. What is good?
Well, this is good, and I just thank you for even doing it and organizing it and wanting to talk to your legislators or even know who they are. I think that is something to be positive about it. And I did thank you for your opening meditation on democracy, which I found moving, and I appreciated that you spent the time with that. And it's important to think about, especially during these times, how important that is. And I just have a lot of faith in these small towns of Vermont. And I live in Plainfield, or outside of Plainfield and Marshfield. And just the resiliency they have shown after a devastating flood. And, over a third, I think, of their structures destroyed. Big parts of the Great Brook are just still gone. They have no idea how they're going to rebuild that road or if it's ever going to get rebuilt. But yet, you go to the town functions and there's still a lot of energy about revitalizing the town and what are they going to do next. And the co-op has bought the hardware store and now that's the only co-op hardware store that I ever know of. So that's what gives me some hope, is some of these local initiatives and local people they're working on that.
I think the same thing. I've done this for all these years because I believe in democracy. Vermont, unlike an awful lot of other places, we do come together and we do talk, and I can talk to you. It's a lot harder to vilify people when they're sitting down eating chili with you. We're real people, and we value our democracy, and we value each other. And I think that is something we really do need to hold on to. If we do that, if we can be respectful and we can share ideas, then I'm optimistic we can solve problems. It just takes the ability to talk.
Yeah, but what came to mind immediately for me is similar. I guess I was thinking about, so on the Natural Resources and Energy Committee last year, we had no Republicans. And this year we have 2 Republicans. And I guess I would just say, I didn't get the chance last session to get to know a lot of Republicans, and that it's actually been really delightful, thinking about, when you're sitting down, just talking with folks, it is so much easier to find common ground and to feel like you can work together to find solutions with people that maybe have different ideas than you do. So that's been really encouraging to me, and I guess I've been thinking a lot recently about self-sufficiency and how, for Vermont, that means, I guess I would call it community sufficiency, right? That we are all connected to each other. And I mean, so many of the ideas that we're hearing is how can we use the resources that we have to help meet our own needs? And I just think of Vermonters as resilient people, and that we're going to together figure out these questions.
I think it was Tolstoy who said, the real law lives in the kindness of our hearts. If our hearts are empty, no laws or political reforms can fill them. I believe in the doctrine of kindness, And I'm surrounded every day by good people who clearly don't agree with me. But they're kind. They're nice people. And we have good conversations with each other. And by gosh, sometimes some of it starts to rub off on me. I won't forget tonight. I'm grateful that you invited us.
We have a comment from Jane Lorendo.
Well, yes, indeed. We have a fire department building. We're not quite ready for a grand opening, but I really would like you to make sure you come when we have our grand opening. Retta is our new president, and I just think it's really important that you come and see it. And the loss we had was devastating. And this community came in and really took all the stuff off the walls so that we could re-insulate the building and we could get the fire trucks in a building by wintertime. And it was amazing, so we really would like you to come back for the opening.
Great. Well, that does conclude our discussion. And before we leave, I think it's fitting and proper that we give thanks where thanks are due. First, we'd like to start with the Woodbury Community Library Board of Trustees who sponsored this event, particularly Trustee August Elliott, who led the charge. And Library Director Myrna Miranda-O'Neill. Thank you for organizing it. And to historic Woodbury Elementary School and the administrators who work cooperatively to make these events possible. So thank you. Also, to the cooks and the bakers who provided the food here tonight, thank you very much. To Hardwick Community Television, who was attendant at so many of our public events and our municipal events. Thank you very much for your recording and documentation of these. It's very important to keep a record. And to our legislators and our assembly. So thank you. And I'll take the liberty of extending an invitation for another event, date to be determined, to keep these connections strong. Thank you all very much. Good night.